Now, what we're seeing in front of us is obviously a hand-tooled illustration here, a hand-drawn illustration. It was created by our very own Brian Maffett, based on a photograph that he shot, but this is all vector-based paths, is what they're called, these path outlines that make up this illustration. And to see these path outlines, to see this illustration in more detail, I want you to go to the toolbox here, and I want you to click on the Zoom tool. What it allows you to do is magnify the illustration just by clicking inside of it. And every time you click, you will slightly enlarge the illustration. And notice as I zoom in onto a detail, like this clock that's on the robot's chest here, that we're seeing these items here in more clarity. We're actually bringing the illustration into sharper focus, or at least we're retaining the exact same focus we ever had, but we're seeing a smaller detail inside the illustration. And the truth of the matter is that you can zoom in to an almost infinite level inside Illustrator and still see sharp details. Now, in fact, you can zoom to 6,400%. That's your maximum zoom level. So 64 times the standard size of the illustration. That's not quite infinite. However, the smoothness of these lines is relatively infinite. It just goes on and on. No matter how far you zoom in, it's always going to look picture perfect. And the illustration is going to print picture perfect as well. Now compare this to the original photograph. I'm going to Alt-Tab my way to Photoshop, where I have open this robot photograph upon which the illustration that we were just looking at a moment ago was based. And I'm going to get the zoom tool inside of Photoshop. If you have Photoshop, you can go ahead and open this robot photograph.jpg file. However, if you don't have Photoshop, or even if you do and you don't feel like opening up the image, you can just follow along with me. Now I'm going to go get my zoom tool, as I said, and I'm going to click inside the robot. And pretty soon, after I click a couple of times in my case, I come to the 100% view size. All right, so I'm just seeing a 1-to-1 ratio of pixels per screen pixels inside this image. Now, if I decide to zoom farther than this on the clock, let's say, I do get bigger details, but they're also fuzzier details because I'm just blowing up pixels from this point on. And I can go to really extraordinarily high zoom levels inside Photoshop as well. As it turns out, I top out at 1,600% inside Photoshop. However, I wouldn't really want to go any bigger than this because I'm just seeing big, huge pixels. These squares, these square dots that make up a photographic image when brought into a computer, whether shot by a digital camera or scanned in, these pixels just grow in size. They just become much bigger. So we don't render out greater detail beyond 100%. So I'm going to go ahead and Alt-Tab my way back to Illustrator. Obviously, Illustrator delivers smoother results, but there is sort of a drawback associated with Illustrator. Illustrator basically demands its pound of flesh here in return for these wonderful results. And by that, I mean that it requires you to draw these objects by hand or using one of the many sophisticated automation tools that are available to Illustrator. You can't just take a camera, for example, shoot a photograph. Not that photography is not an amazing art, but it is a little simpler if you just want to go out there in the field and just shoot a photograph of a robot than to draw this illustration. Brian, for example, spent, I would say, about 30 seconds shooting the picture of the photograph. And as I recall now, several days drawing this photograph over time. So it was hours and hours and hours that he spent on this particular wonderful illustration here. So illustrations are demanding, but illustrations are also super smooth.